The path to Isdalen was not an easy one, even for the locals who were born with the steep, rain-slicked granite of Bergen under their feet. It was November 29th, 1970, a Sunday afternoon, when the light in Norway began to fail early, casting long, bruised shadows across the valley floors. Isdalen, known locally as Ice Valley, had a reputation that predated the events of that day. It was a place where the sun struggled to reach, a treacherous slide of scree and moss where hikers often lost their footing, and where, in centuries past, people had gone to end their lives. A university professor and his 2 young daughters were picking their way up the north face of Mount Ulriken. The air was crisp, carrying the metallic scent of impending snow, but as they climbed higher into the rocky scree, a different smell began to weave through the pine trees. It was sweet, cloying, and undeniably organic, the smell of burning meat. One of the daughters stopped first. Among the grey boulders, something disrupted the natural pattern of the landscape. It wasn't a rock, and it wasn't a fallen log. It was a woman. She was lying in a supine position, her body twisted among the stones in what forensic pathologists would later call the fencer's pose, arms raised and clenched in a final, heat-induced spasm. She was dead, and she had been burning for some time, though there was no raging fire nearby, only the charred remnants of a small, intense blaze that had consumed the front of her body. Her face was unrecognizable, a mask of soot and destroyed tissue. Her hair, once long and dark, was singed away. The police arrived as the light died completely. What they found at the scene turned a grim discovery into a baffling tableau. The woman was not just dead, she had been erased. Objects were scattered around her body in a manner that felt ceremonial, or perhaps frantic. There was a bottle of St. Halvard liqueur, mostly empty, 2 plastic water bottles that smelled faintly of petrol, a silver spoon with the monogram scratched out, a cup, and a tube of phenomal sleeping pills. But it was the clothing that unsettled the investigators the most. As they carefully lifted the charred remnants of her wardrobe from the wet ground, they noticed a peculiar detail. The tags on her clothes, the manufacturer's labels, the washing instructions, the store names had all been cut out. Not ripped in a struggle, but surgically removed with scissors. Every single one. She had no purse, no wallet, no passport, no keys. She was a woman who had walked into the Ice Valley to die, and she had taken extreme measures to ensure that when she did, she would be nothing more than a body without a name. The body was transported to the Gades Institute in Bergen for autopsy. The medical examiners were immediately confronted with contradictions. The woman had soot in her lungs, indicating she was alive when she started to burn. The carbon monoxide levels in her blood were lethal. However, her stomach also contained roughly 50 to 70 undigested particles of phenomal, a powerful barbiturate. She had swallowed a massive overdose, enough to kill her before the fire ever touched her skin. Yet, there was violence too. A distinct bruise on the right side of her neck suggested a blow, perhaps a karate chop or a fall against a rock. The autopsy could not determine if it was murder or suicide. If it was suicide, the method was excruciatingly complex. Swallowing a handful of pills, dousing oneself in paraffin, and lighting a match while waiting for the drugs to take hold. If it was murder, it was staged to look like a ritual. The police were left with a physical description, but no identity. She was roughly 1.64 meters tall, 5 feet 4 inches, with curved hips and small hands. Her hair was brownish black, and she had likely worn it in a ponytail, tied with a blue and white ribbon found at the scene. They estimated her age between 30 and 40, but the most distinct feature lay inside her mouth. Her dental work was unique, extensive gold crowns, and bridges that were not consistent with Norwegian dentistry. It was expensive work, the kind done in Central or Southern Europe. Days turned into weeks. The police circulated a composite sketch, a round-faced woman with dark eyes and high cheekbones, but no one came forward. No husband reported a missing wife. No parents called looking for a daughter. The Isdal Woman, as the press dubbed her, was a ghost. The breakthrough came from a stroke of routine police work. Investigators found 2 keys at the scene, but they didn't fit any local locks. On a hunch, detectives checked the left luggage lockers at the Bergen railway station. The keys fit locker number 64/96. Inside were 2 blue suitcases. When the police opened them, they expected answers. Instead, they found a kit for a spy or a woman on the run. The suitcases contained a strange assortment of items: wigs in different styles and colors, non-prescription glasses, likely for disguise, German and Norwegian currency, and a variety of high-end cosmetics. But just like the clothes on the body, the items in the suitcase had been sanitized. The labels were cut from the clothes. The brand names were scratched off the jars of face cream. Even the bottom of a hairbrush had been scraped to remove the manufacturer's mark. However, the person trying to erase herself had made a mistake. Buried in the lining of one suitcase was a plastic shopping bag from a shoe store in Stavanger, a city south of Bergen, and hidden deeper still was a black writing pad. The pad didn't contain a diary in the traditional sense. It contained rows of numbers and letters: 22, O, 28, P, 9, N, 14, B, 18, M, 27, O. It was a code. The police cracked it relatively quickly. It was a travel log. The letters stood for months and locations, the numbers for dates: O for October, N for November, P for Paris, B for Bergen, S for Stavanger. With the code broken, the police could trace her movements. She had been crisscrossing Europe and Norway for months: Paris, Hamburg, Oslo, Trondheim, Stavanger, and finally, Bergen. They took the shopping bag to the shoe store in Stavanger. The clerk remembered her. She had bought a pair of blue rubber boots, the same boots found near the body in Isdalen. The clerk described her as elegant, speaking English with an accent, and smelling of a peculiar, spicy scent, later identified as the garlic she frequently ate, or perhaps a heavy perfume. With the dates from the coded notepad, the police checked hotel registries across Norway. They found her, but they didn't find one woman. They found 8. She checked in as Geneviève Lancier from Louvain. She was Claudia Thielt from Brussels. She was Vera Jarl from Antwerp. She was Alexia Zana-Merches from Ljubljana. She was Fenella Lorck. She was Elizabeth Lienhauer. She had a different passport for each name. She changed her profession on the registration forms. Sometimes she was an antiques dealer, sometimes a saleswoman, sometimes an ornament decorator. She always requested a room with a balcony. She always paid in cash, and she always seemed to be waiting for someone. Who was she really? This question has haunted investigators for over 50 years. In the absence of a name, her background had to be reconstructed from the fragments she left behind. We know she was a woman of some means. The clothes in her suitcase, though delabeled, were of high quality. She possessed a travel iron, 500 Deutsche Marks, and a spoon that appeared to be part of a silver set. She traveled comfortably, staying in good hotels, ordering porridge and milk, and drinking wine. In 2016, modern science offered a glimpse into her childhood. The Norwegian verdict of suicide had closed the case in 1971, but the woman's jaw had been preserved in the archives. Modern isotopic analysis of her teeth revealed her geographic history. The chemical signature in her enamel suggested she was born around 1930, likely in the Nuremberg area of Germany. She had moved as a child, perhaps to the border region between France and Germany. This fit with the linguistic analysis. Witnesses said she spoke English, German, and French, but often claimed to be Belgian. Her Belgian identity was a lie, but perhaps it was a lie close to the truth, a cover for a German origin that might have been unpopular in post-war Norway. The timing of her birth placed her squarely in the chaos of World War II. Was she a refugee, an orphan? Her teeth showed signs of malnutrition during her childhood, consistent with the war years, but the expensive dental work done later in life suggested a dramatic change in fortune. Her behavior in the hotels painted a picture of a woman deeply paranoid. Maids reported that she would move the heavy furniture in her rooms, barricading the doors. She would sit in the hotel restaurant, smoking constantly, watching the entrance. In one instance, a maid walked into her room to find her staring at the wall, motionless, terrified. She was not a ghost. She was a woman hunted, but by whom? Norway in 1970 was the northern flank of NATO, a critical strategic point in the Cold War against the Soviet Union. Bergen was a hub of naval activity. As police layered her travel dates over military records, a chilling pattern emerged. The Isdal Woman was in Stavanger when the Norwegian military was testing the new Penguin anti-ship missile. She was in Bergen during naval trials. Her movements shadowed the movements of top-secret military exercises. This led to the spy theory. Was she an intelligence gatherer? Her multiple passports and wigs suggested tradecraft. The total removal of labels was standard operating procedure for agents who needed to be untraceable if caught or killed. Witnesses came forward with strange accounts. A man reported seeing her at the Hotel Horderheimen in Bergen, sitting with a grey-haired man, speaking in intense whispers. Another witness, a fisherman, claimed to have seen her observing military movements near the coast. But the most haunting account came from a 26-year-old local man who spoke to the police years later. He claimed that 5 days before the body was found, he was hiking in Isdalen. He saw a woman walking on the trail, dressed elegantly in city clothes that were entirely unsuited for the rough terrain. She was terrified. Walking behind her were two men in dark coats who looked southern or Mediterranean. The woman locked eyes with the hiker. She opened her mouth to speak, to scream, but then looked back at the men and clamped her mouth shut. She passed him in silence. The hiker reported this to the police at the time. He was told to forget it. The case would never be solved. An officer allegedly told him. His report was never filed in the official documents. On November 23, 1970, the woman checked out of the Hotel Horderheimen. She paid her bill in cash and asked the receptionist to call her a taxi. This was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. For 6 days, she vanished. Where did she go? The autopsy showed that her stomach contained the remains of a distinct meal, something that couldn't have been digested if she had died days earlier. This meant she was alive until shortly before she was found on the 29th. Did she stay in another hotel under a 9th alias? Did she stay with the man seen in the hallway? The timeline suggests she went to the railway station, placed her suitcases in the locker, and then waited. The items found at the crime scene offer a confusing narrative. The silver spoons suggest she might have been eating a yogurt or a light meal. The alcohol suggests she was drinking to build courage or to sedate herself. The phenomyl pills were swallowed in a massive quantity. If it was suicide, why Isdalen? Why walk deep into a freezing, rocky valley, light a fire, and burn yourself? And where did the passports go? They were never found, not in the suitcases, not at the scene. If she wanted to disappear, she succeeded, but someone must have taken the passports. Fire does not selectively incinerate leather booklets while leaving plastic bottles intact. The investigation was closed in early 1971. The official verdict was suicide by overdose and carbon monoxide poisoning. The removal of labels was attributed to a mental breakdown, a desire to leave her life behind. The spy connections were dismissed as coincidental. On February 5th, 1971, the Isdal Woman was buried in the Mullendal Cemetery in Bergen. She was placed in a white, zinc-lined coffin. The zinc was chosen specifically to preserve her remains, just in case. One day, her family came looking. The funeral was attended by 18 members of the Bergen police force. There was no priest, no family, no friends. A short graveside ceremony was conducted, and she was lowered into the earth in a grave marked only by a wooden cross and a temporary alias. Decades passed. The wooden cross rotted away, but the mystery did not. In 2016, Norwegian journalists and the NRK, Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation, reopened the case. They located the tissue samples in the hospital archives. They found the jawbone. They ran DNA testing. The results ruled out the theory that she was Israeli, a popular theory linked to Mossad operations. She was of distinct European descent. The handwriting analysis suggested she learned to write in a francophone country, Belgium or France. They published the sketches and the isotopic maps worldwide. They received hundreds of tips. A woman in the United States believed the Isdal Woman was her missing aunt. A man in Germany thought she was his lost sister, but the DNA did not match. The Isdal Woman remains one of the Cold War's darkest riddles. Was she a spy caught in a game she couldn't win, executed by her handlers or her enemies? Was she a mentally ill woman running from imaginary demons who finally caught up with her in the Ice Valley? Or was she something else entirely? A woman with a criminal past, an art thief, or a mistress on the run? The blue suitcases sit in a police museum now. The code is solved, but the message is still unread. The woman who tried to erase herself succeeded in every way but one. She became unforgettable. In the damp, grey silence of the Isdalen Valley, the scree still shifts under the feet of hikers, and the wind still whistles through the pines, keeping the secret of the woman who came from nowhere and went back to nothing. If someone stumbled across the Isdal Woman's case today, the whole investigation would play out like a completely different movie. The detectives in 1970 were doing their best with magnifying glasses and fingerprints, but they were trying to catch a ghost with a net full of holes. Today, the fog that's covered the Ice Valley for 50 years wouldn't stand a chance against the kind of tech we have lying around. It's not about finding new clues in the dirt anymore. It's about making the old evidence talk. The biggest game changer would be the DNA. Back then, it didn't exist. Even when they reopened the case in 2016 and got a profile, they hit a wall because she wasn't in any criminal database. But nowadays, that doesn't matter. With the explosion of home ancestry kits, you don't need the criminal's DNA. You just need a distant cousin who decided to trace their family tree one weekend. Investigators would take the DNA from her jawbone and plug it into those massive public databases. They wouldn't be looking for her directly, but for a third cousin or a great aunt, someone who shares just a tiny fraction of her genetic code. From there, it's just a math problem. You build the family tree backward to a common ancestor in the 1800s, then trace it forward until you find a girl born around 1930 who just vanished. It's the exact same trick that caught the Golden State Killer. If the legal red tape wasn't in the way, her name could probably be found in a couple of weeks. And it's not just about who she was, but where she had been. The old investigation knew she traveled, but modern science could practically draw a map of her last year alive just by analyzing a single strand of hair. Since hair grows about a centimeter a month, it acts like a timeline. By cutting it into tiny sections and checking the chemical isotopes, scientists could see exactly what water she was drinking and what food she was eating week by week. They could tell if she was sipping mineral water in the Alps in August or tap water in London in September. It would verify those coded notebooks instantly, or reveal if she spent a secret month in a hospital or a prison that nobody knew about. Then there's the face. The sketches we have are just artistic guesses, but today, AI and digital artists could take her skull and rebuild her face so perfectly it would look like a photograph. Run that image through facial recognition software against millions of old digitized photos from the 60s and 70s, and you might just find her standing in the background of a tourist snapshot in Paris or walking through a protest in Berlin. We'd also look closer at her stuff. In 1970, if they didn't see a fingerprint, they assumed the object was clean. But we know better now. Touch DNA is a real thing. Even if someone wiped down that silver spoon or the liqueur bottle, they probably left microscopic skin cells behind in the grooves. If detectives found a second person's DNA on her suitcase handle today, the whole suicide theory would go out the window instantly. It would prove she wasn't alone. Since we don't have those answers yet, the silence has been filled with theories. Over the decades, people have spun the few facts we have into a bunch of different stories, trying to make sense of the woman who tried so hard to be no one. The most famous one, the one that feels like it belongs in a spy novel, is the Cold War connection. It just fits the geography too well. Norway, in 1970, was a strategic hotspot, and this woman was bouncing around cities right when the military was testing top-secret anti-ship missiles. She was in the right place at the right time to be watching. The wigs, the fake passports, the way she scrubbed the labels off her clothes. It all screams spy tradecraft. But if she was a spy, she was a messy one. Spies are supposed to be invisible, but she was constantly drawing attention to herself, demanding room changes, staring at people, smelling like strong garlic. The theory here is that she wasn't a smooth operator. She was a spy who had burned out. Maybe she was trying to run from her own handlers. That would explain why she was so paranoid, moving furniture against the doors. The men seen following her in the valley weren't enemies. They were a cleanup crew sent to silence a liability. Then again, maybe it wasn't about politics at all. There's a strong chance she was mixed up in organized crime. In the 70s, check fraud rings were huge in Europe, moving from city to city with fake IDs to cash bad checks. The wigs and makeup might have just been disguises for bank tellers, not border guards. The paranoia came from carrying around a bag full of stolen cash and knowing the cops were close. The violence in the valley could have been a gang enforcement, punishment for skimming off the top. For a long time, people also thought she might be Israeli intelligence, linked to Mossad, especially since Mossad was active in Norway a few years later. But the DNA testing pretty much killed that idea. Her genetics were strictly European, likely from the French-German border. And then there's the saddest possibility, the one the police originally believed, that there were no spies, no gangsters, and no hitmen. Just a woman losing her grip on reality. The furniture barricades, the constant traveling, the fear of being watched. It all looks a lot like severe mental illness. In this version, the codes in her book weren't spy messages, just the obsessive notes of a troubled mind trying to keep order. She cut the labels off her clothes, not to hide from the KGB, but to strip away her own identity, because she didn't want to be herself anymore. She went to the ice valley to escape the voices in her head, and the men the hiker saw were just innocent tourists that her fear twisted into monsters. The truth is, probably somewhere in the messy middle, she was almost certainly doing something illegal. Innocent tourists don't carry 8 passports, but she might not have been a master spy. She was likely a low-level courier, a disposable asset for some group, whether it was the Stasi or a crime ring. She messed up, she got scared, and she ran. But you can't run forever. The fire in Isdal was the final act of erasing a woman who had been wearing masks for so long that she forgot what her real face looked like. The rain in Bergen eventually washes everything clean. It washes the soot from the stones in Isdalen and the dust from the streets where she once walked in her blue rubber boots, but it cannot wash away the silence she left behind. Somewhere in Europe, a family tree has a broken branch. There is a gap where a sister, an aunt, or a daughter used to be, a woman who packed her bags in 1970 and simply ceased to exist. The files in the Bergen police archives are yellowing now, filled with the meticulously decoded ciphers of a traveller who never reached her destination. The zinc coffin remains in the earth, a sealed time capsule waiting for a name that may never come. In a modern world where every footstep is digital and every face is recognized, the Isdal Woman stands as a chilling anomaly, a ghost in the machine who proved that it is possible to be seen by everyone and known by no one. She came to the Valley of Ice to hide, or perhaps to be found. In the end, she achieved the rarest of all spycraft victories. She became a mystery that even time cannot solve. The wind still howls through the valley, but the woman with no name sleeps on, her secret safe in the cold, dark ground. The case of the Isdal Woman is more than just a cold case. It is a masterclass in disappearance. Over 50 years later, despite DNA technology, global databases, and the internet sleuth community, she remains a cipher. Was she a victim of the Cold War's invisible battles? A woman running from a criminal past? Or simply a tragic soul looking for a quiet place to end it all? The evidence is there. The cut labels, the coded diary, the burnt body. But the picture they form is still out of focus. Until the day someone recognizes the woman in the sketch, the Isdal Woman will remain Norway's darkest secret. If you have a theory on who she was, or if you think the spy theory holds water, let us know in the comments below. Stay safe, and remember, sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are the ones that happen in plain sight.